Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Logistics Executive TV. Today, I am joined by a celebrity, a man of many varied talents and profile around the world. He is a global authority on self-leadership, and I've been following him for many, many years and seen an incredible amount of input and guidance that he's provided to his followers. He unlocks human potential in the age of AI. He's the author of about 5 books, I think, and the latest one, Potentialize, we'll talk a little bit about later. He is a well-known global keynote speaker and an executive coach. Andrew, Bryant, is that much of an introduction? Is that sort of rounded out, or can you tell us a bit more?
Introductions are always really funny because you raise the bar.
So. Andrew, I've been following you extensively. I haven't been trolling you, but recently I reached out and thanks for coming on. And tell us a little bit about the story on the journey as to where you are, and especially from my interest is really how you've got to the tier 1 area of keynote speeches and motivational work around, especially leveraging off the books that you write.
Okay. So my story begins in England. Went to an English grammar school, was a pretty good science student, and was thinking, well, I should go and do medicine because that's what you do if you're a good science student. Only they decided to merge my boys' grammar school with the girls' high school, which shifted my focus. And I didn't get the grades for medicine, and I ended up doing physiotherapy. Now that was a gift. I really enjoyed physiotherapy. Because it's a very pragmatic science. I mean, you do anatomy and physiology, and you do physics of levers and weights. And I really enjoyed it. And it gave me 2 gifts. It gave me the gift of curiosity. You're always, very curious as a physiotherapist around how does somebody run faster or jump higher, or why are they having a problem with that? And it also gave me the gift of observation in that, you're trained to watch how people move. And years later, after having moved from England to Australia and worked with sports teams, that curiosity and observation helped me to help sports teams win and athletes win. And that gained the attention of leaders. In fact, one particular managing director who sponsored a sports team said, "You've helped my sports team win. Now come and work with my management team." And I initially had an imposter syndrome because I hadn't worked in management, but I went in with this blank sheet, tabula rasa of observation and curiosity. And I watched a group of senior leaders talk and behave, and I could immediately see what was going wrong because I didn't have an existing management consultant mindset. I actually was going, well, I don't know what best is. Let's just watch. And that led me to deal with my imposter syndrome. I go off and do an MBA, and during the leadership and psychology, I started arguing with my professor who was giving me these theories, and I said, yeah, but that won't work in practice. And he was a great professor because he said to me, Andrew, you've got some good ideas. Why don't you go do your own research, write your own book? And of course, the rest is history. I did that and developed my methodology out of curiosity and observation.
Good. 5 books later.
5 books later, yes.
Good stuff. So the journey, you travel around. I haven't crossed paths with you yet, and I haven't seen you live, but I've seen the movie. We do end up in many of the same places. Keynote speaking, just as a bit of a snapshot in this area, is an absolute talent, not for everybody. And it's one of those things that I'm particularly interested in because I do a little bit of it myself and emceeing conferences. Would you say, well, first of all, what are the most interesting events that you speak at? And 2, what would be a tip for people wanting to get into it or other speakers who want to improve their lot?
Okay, well, it's not a simple tip because most people think that they should be a speaker because they have a story. And there's a nice alliteration that I share with people that come to me for coaching to be a speaker. And I say, you've probably had a moment, right? And that's, you've survived cancer, or you went to war, or, you got your legs blown off, or, everybody's had a moment. And, you've got young Scandinavian economic warriors, they have this epiphany, road to Damascus moment, we need to save the planet. Or somebody discovers Reiki, and now everybody needs to know about Reiki. I'm not dissing that. I'm just saying that people get excited about their message. And they go, well, everybody needs to hear me. Well, no, they don't, is the sad truth, right? Our moment is our moment, and nobody's going to pay you for your moment. There are some great stories out there. Clearly, keynote speakers who've won a gold medal in the national sport, right? I mean, if you win the championships, you being a New Zealander, an All Blacks captain can get on a stage by virtue of the fact that he is an All Blacks captain, but doesn't make him a great speaker. He can talk about a moment, but that moment has to evolve into a message, and the message has to be relevant to the audience. Here's how my moment translates into a message into your life. So this is, I've done it, you can do it too, right? Now, of course, you see lots of people do that. I've been on a life journey. I've lost 50 kilos. You can do it too. I overcame cancer. You can do it too. So that's a moment and a message. It's still not enough, right? There must be a methodology and a model to do that. So an example would be, say, Stephen Covey. The moment and the message is, his study of leadership and management, but he created this beautiful 7 habits model and methodology. Here's how you can become, a more effective leader. And so, okay, well, I could follow that. I could duplicate that. That now becomes the 5th M, which is marketable. Right? Because if you've got a moment, a message, you're a good storyteller, you've got a good moment, but you can create a delta for whoever's watching the audience, right? So which is why people who say, well, look, I made $1 million, you can too, and follow my 7 steps and you can invest to be $1 million. Whether they can deliver or not is another story, but that actually is a good formula. So that's what people miss. They get the first bit. I've had this. Everybody needs to hear what I have. It's not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's brutal honesty and the truth. It resonates very, very clearly. I've heard a couple of All Black captains speak, and they were rubbish at the time, I can tell you. So clearly they needed a bit of your executive coaching, my friend. But look, it's brilliant. I appreciate that input because, everybody thinks that their story, as you say, is golden, but really there's got to be a lot more to it. The latest book, people will see shortly when the book's released, a bit of a review on the book, quite an in-depth review on the book. But maybe you can just put out there what the journey has been for you through the various books. And just where the thing has gone, it's what the progression of the books themselves.
Okay. Well, I'll take you through the books as a journey rather than a plug, although I won't be able to help myself, marketing there somehow. But so my first book was A Happy Accident, and I had been through a business disruption. I'm living in a backpackers hostel in King's Cross. And I was invited to write a manuscript. And I wrote a manuscript on communication skills because I knew a bit about communication. And that went to a publisher. And I got a call to meet with the publisher. And they said, we read your manuscript. And I said, that's great. And they said, we really liked it. I said, that's wonderful. They said, we're not going to publish it. And I said, I'm sorry, please help. I'm not making sense. And they said to me, do you know anything about flirting? And I said, excuse me. They said, flirting, boy meets girl. And I said, well, look, I'm a single guy in Sydney. Yeah, I know a bit about flirting, and flirting is a communication skill. And they said, yeah, that's what we thought. Our competition is publishing a book on flirting in the autumn. Could you spin your manuscript and put it to be about flirting? And could you get a female perspective? Now, as it happened, I knew a woman who was an expert in dating. This was before online dating. She ran an executive introduction agency. And we got together and we went through my manuscript and we spun it to come out as a book. And that came out in 2001, The Street Guide to Flirting, it was called. Now, this has got nothing to do with all the leadership work I do, but it has everything to do to your first question is I had a message about how to communicate effectively, but nobody was going to buy yet another communication book. But people needed to know how to connect with members of the opposite sex or just to have conversations, feel confident in business conversation. That was a need. And I had a methodology to do that. In fact, I went on TV. We went on a TV show in Melbourne, and they gave me 4 students for the morning to train. And then in that evening, they put them in a bar with secret cameras and saw them execute my lesson and flirt with people. So I had a minimum viable product in that I had a methodology that was then tested and observable that created change. And that's the key, whether you're teaching leadership or management or whatever, you've got to demonstrate that your participants can change. Yeah. So whilst the topic was not what I wanted to talk about, it taught me about writing, and it taught me about marketing and speaking to the needs of the audience. The next book was the book I wanted to write, which is the New Leadership Playbook. It's here, which the publisher McGraw-Hill added a subtitle, How to Become a More Successful, Efficient and Effective Leader from the Inside Out. So they're selling the transformation in the subtitle. Self-leadership, nobody knew what that was when this book came out in 2012. People had heard of it, but it was a fairly new term. And so, well, why do I need self-leadership? And I've made this akin to, why do I need a gym membership, right? I own a fitness center in Australia as well. And one of my sidelines, being a physiotherapist, it was easy for me to do that. And I realized people don't buy gym memberships for a gym membership. You don't go to the coffee shop and show people your shiny vinyl card and say, here's my gym membership. You join a membership because you have a need. And if I ask people what their need is, and people say, well, lose weight, get fit. But I actually could say, well, if you were really, truly honest, and I don't know whether you're going to have to cut this, but it is, do you feel good naked? Because that is ultimately why somebody buys a gym membership, right? Whether they want to feel good about themselves or good with the lights on. If you actually marketed to that, and I didn't, but I wish I had, then you would sell lots of gym memberships. So the tagline of the self-leadership book, How to Become a More Successful, Efficient and Effective Leader, is what people want. And it's an inside-out process, which is the new methodology. Stop looking at your people, start looking in the mirror at yourself, and then become the mirror for your people. So that was that. That became a textbook on MBA programs, which was kind of my, thumbs up to my professor who told me I needed to go write my own book. Then back to the marketing challenge again. One of my marketing team said, we love your book. And I said, thank you. But it's really hard to read. And I'm like, well, what do you mean it's hard to read? Well, if people are not interested in management, leadership psychology, maybe not. Could you write a smaller one? And can you write it in 3 days, because we have somebody available to do all the layout? And so this book came out. I wrote it in 3 days. It's called Self-Leadership, 12 Powerful Mindsets and Methods to Win in Business. See the framework here. People want to win in life and business. And I did it in 3 days, and it's very thin. It doesn't cost me very much. We put it on Amazon. It went Amazon bestseller for a couple of days. And that, to anybody who wants some credibility, some executive presence, write something, even if it's just a white paper. Have something that you can show your thought leadership, your credibility. So, I can print this off and give it away at the same price almost as a business card. And people don't tend to throw a book away. We all throw business cards away. Yep. But if somebody gives us a book, even if we don't read it, it sits on a shelf for a while. And then one day you go, oh, I've got a book by that guy. So there you go.
Cool.
So that was number 3.
That's the one you read on the metro or on the bus in the morning.
It is. It was specifically designed for an easy read. And also I made it much more readable because I was doing some work with at-risk and disadvantaged teenagers as a corporate social responsibility for a global bank. And I wanted something that teenagers could read. So I made it really simple. One of the things about life is, having gone to an English grammar school, I love language, but if your language creates a barrier between you and the listener, you have a problem. And what we've seen in the world today is some people who you think that I'm not sure they can even string a cogent sentence together, but they speak to a particular audience. It's quite a revelation, isn't it? That if we can't say it simply, we don't really understand our audience. Anyway, a little profound point there for your listeners.
And of course, you're not referring to any current world leaders when you mention that. So obviously, we can move on.
Oh, terrific, yeah. So okay, then by this time I'm traveling the world, working with senior leadership teams, speaking at conferences. I was working with a Silicon Valley software company, coaching the executive leadership team, the CEO, CTO, CFO, et cetera. And the CPO, the Chief People Officer, said, could you write us a book so we can cascade this down through the organization? And I'm like, well, that's a lot of work to write a book. I know, I've done it. And we had a backwards and forwards, but I agreed to write it for them for a fee, but I hung on to the intellectual property. And out came the new leadership playbook, Being Human whilst successfully delivering accelerated results. And it's called a playbook because it was an American audience. A play is a set of behaviors, particularly in American rules football, right? You run a play. If I was to publish it again, I might call it 12 Leadership Conversations, because my revelation in working with leaders around the world is that leadership is a conversation, either one-to-one or one-to-many. And most leaders are good at broadcasting, but terrible at conversations. They're not good at hearing and processing and repackaging. And I identified 12 conversations that every leader pretty much has. Clearly there's the why conversation, as made famous by Simon Sinek, but also there's a fish on the table conversation. If the fish is under the table, it rots and stinks. If we put the fish on the table, we can cook it and eat it. So how do we have, a difficult conversation, a high stakes conversation with people in a way that we can talk about the issues without people getting personal and defensive? And so I wrote this book to address those issues, and that's been very successful.
Brilliant.
So I'm very pleased about that. And so that was number 4. Number 5, having written 4 and being active on LinkedIn as you are, I get hit up for stuff. And Wiley came to me and said, are you working on anything? And when they first reached out, I didn't think it was actually the publisher. I thought it was some scam, but it turned out to actually be the publisher who were reaching out to me and said, are you working on anything? And it's kind of nice because typically you have to bang on the publisher's door. So when they come to you, that I guess it's a sign you've arrived somewhere in your life journey.
I think so.
I'm going to take it as a win. Anyway, so they knocked on my door and said, "You're working on anything?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I am. I'm working on this issue." Right. In my last book, I talked about being human and delivering results, and that's the dichotomy that we have in management and leadership. We want to drive results, but if we can't do it at the expense of being human, because when we do, people leave or burn out. So now the issue is, how do we be human in an age of AI, particularly because AI and robotics have kicked our butt in terms of performance. And so the results piece, performance, how fast can we move from point A to point B? How many widgets do we produce? How many words can we type or lines of code can we write? That's in the past. Right? Because AI and robotics can beat us on that. But what it can't beat us on is the humanity. And I'd like to write about that. And they said, "Oh, great idea." And they said, "Right, we'll send you an advance." And I'm like, "Okay, now I've got to write the book." Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams might say, "Build it and they will come." There's a reality is sell it and then you've got to build it. It's sort of a marketing maxim, right? So now I've taken their money. I had to write the book, and I started interviewing people like crazy and going, "Okay, well, where are you at AI?" And I started watching the news. And there's a couple of case studies that are very popular, but they are, you may have heard them before, but it doesn't matter because they tell 2 really important stories. The first is Klarna, the finance giant out of Sweden, who went boots in, all in on AI, put bots for all their customer service. And the CEO was very courageous. In fact, I salute him because he went public and said, "We went too hard, too fast, and our customers noticed, and it cost us. So now we're rehiring the customer people. And I think that's a clear message, that you need to, evaluate the impact and not lose the humanity. And I thought, well, that's great. And then another case study is Moderna. We're famous, obviously, for the COVID vaccine. And they merged the CTO function, Chief Technology Officer, with the Chief People Officer, which sends an incredible message that technology and humanity have to work together if we're going to create any transformation. And I thought, okay, I'm onto something here. So those case studies obviously went in the book. And as I looked at Microsoft's transformation, Google, Salesforce, companies like Patagonia who used AI for the planet, I recognized that there was a framework that anybody was doing it followed a particular framework, and it came out with a lovely acronym: IGNITE, I for inspire, G for guide, N for nurture, IG, and I for integrating with technology, T for the transformation, creating the change. As I said, if there's no change, we're not going to get paid, and E for the evaluate, which often organizations weren't doing. And that's gone into the book with various case studies and how you roll that out. And so I'm very excited when that comes out in January 2026. And I'll be speaking and running workshops about that. In fact, my first workshop on that will be in October in Mumbai. I'll be running a prelim, a pilot run of the workshop.
Brilliant. Well, Andrew, that's an incredible journey and very efficiently told through 5 books, which is no mean feat, just to write one. I wrote one chapter for a book for a professor about 10 years ago. It took me about 3 months. So I'm sure you've got a much better process, and being able to use AI to help you these days.
It is interesting. I did use AI with the 5th book. The other 4 it wasn't around for.
Yeah.
What I would say is, a mentor of mine long ago taught me there is no great writing, only great rewriting, right? So the first stuff you write is rubbish. It always is. So where people get writer's block and don't want to write is that they think that they've got to write Keats, Shelley, or Shakespeare with a first run, and that's rubbish. It never happens. You've just got to write. If you did 3 months and you wrote, the difference would be like, the analogy would be if you exercised for 3 months and stopped, you wouldn't get the result. So with writing, if you did 3 months, I would say in retrospect, you don't stop, you just keep writing. And that's what I do. I mean, if I'll just post something on LinkedIn just to get it off my chest, or I'll put it in a blog, or I'll put it in a file. But I write every day as a discipline. Most of it's rubbish, most of it's repetition, most of it's derivative. But every now and again, I write something and I go, you know what, I've never heard anybody else say that before. That's an insight. And I'll test it on something, and somebody goes, well, that's it. Nobody's said that. And I'm like, okay, now I've got something. And then you massage it and you edit it and you build it out and add stories and you argue against it. And then you've got something tangible. But it is a discipline, and most people don't realize that it's a discipline, and that's the way it goes.
Brilliant. Well, look, awesome journey so far, and we're really looking forward to when you do publish. You and I have spoken off camera about actually meeting up in person. With a little bit of luck and good fortune and a following wind, it will be here in Dubai at some point in the near future.
Well, I am specifically talking to the publisher about doing a book launch in Dubai. So okay. we must talk off camera about that, and I'd love to collaborate.
Well, we are celebrating our 20th year in Dubai, as I mentioned off camera, in the next month or two. So it'd be great to be able to, have you on site and around and having a function of being involved to getting some people along for your launch. Andrew Bryant, self-leadership expert, guru, keynote speaker, author, general good guy, Australian, UK, Portuguese, Asian. Pleasure to have you on the show, and I really look forward to seeing how the new book goes and staying in touch.
Well, thank you. Great to catch up, Kim.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. The man, the myth, the legend. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Logistics Executive TV. Thanks again, Andrew.